everyone, welcome back to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti Zenati, and I have a very special guest today, Shai Davidai. He's an Israeli-born social psychologist, former assistant professor at Columbia Business School. He gained international attention following the October 7th, 2023 attacks for his fierce public criticism of university administrators regarding anti-Semitism on campus. He has since shifted from academia to full-time advocacy, hosting the podcast Here I Am with Shai Davidai, and writing a book about the crisis in higher education. Shai is also a loving partner to Yarden and a father of two. Shai, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for, you're Israeli, but pronouncing my name perfectly. It's so nice to, yeah. Not that I especially like my name, but the fact of it's being distorted in so many ways, and getting an Israeli saying it, it's nice.
Yeah, I've heard so many things. Trust me, my name has been through a bunch of things. So before we get into the more current matters, just take us back to growing up in Israel in the 80s and 90s. What was it like for you, and how did it shape you as a person?
Wow. So you're saying, give us a short introduction to your existence.
Yeah.
Look, I always tell people that if I had a time machine, I would go back and raise my kids in Israel in the late 80s and early 90s.
Oh, it was the best.
Now, it's not that Israel did not have its problem. It had many, many problems. Right. But, it was still a very, very small country. It was kind of disconnected from the world. We would used to get like movies 6 months after they came out all over the world. The TV, we only had one channel, so everyone watched that channel. And it really felt like, in Hebrew, we say meduat hashevet, like the tribe's bonfire, and that we would all go to school or family events or whatever, and everyone was paying attention to the same thing, and then having this communal reactions to it. Now, of course, that meant that it was too hegemonic. There wasn't many voices of women, of religious Jews, of Sephardic Jews, of LGBTQ. Like, there were many, many problems, and hopefully we've fixed many of them and are fixing them in Israeli society. But it was just a feeling of, we're in this together, and I just loved it. So I grew up in Kiryat Ono, which back then was a small suburb of Tel Aviv, and when I was 6 or 7 years old, we officially turned into a city because we had 30,000.
Oh, wow.
Now it's one of the biggest, and most successful cities around the area, in Tel Aviv area. But back then it was just like a small place. We had 3 buses, 168, 55, and 56. I would hop on the bus, skipping school to go shopping for books and CDs in Tel Aviv. It was, it was, I don't know if blessed, but I'm really grateful for the childhood I had.
Yeah, I think we're the same age, probably, more or less.
I think I'm a bit older, but yeah.
I'm 42, I don't know.
I'm 22,
yeah. But growing up around that time I feel like as kids, we didn't feel all those, what you said initially about women and Sephardic voices and all that. And I come from a Sephardic family, but as kids, we didn't feel that as much. I think we were outside playing. We went to school. We roller skated outside. We listened to music, danced, did whatever. It was different times. No social media, no nothing, none of that stuff.
Yeah, and of course there was a real shattering that naivete with way before the Second Intifada, with the first suicide bombings of 1994. There was a little bit of like this, oh wait, reality infringes on you despite trying to live in your bubble. I remember being 12 and having a big conversation in class about, should we go on with our Purim party that was planned or not, because the day before there was a suicide attack in Tel Aviv. And like, as 12-year-olds, we would have these conversations of, do we let the terrorists win by canceling our party, or do we do we have the party, but then what about the people who are suffering? And so, those were not normal conversations for 12-year-olds to have, but I feel like that was the moment where things really shattered for us. And then, of course, with Rabin's assassination and everything, and kind of like childhood ended in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, we also had the Gulf War, obviously, in 1990, which, I was 7, but I still remember going to school with those masks, that we had to take with to school. And obviously when we were teenagers, all the Intifada, the suicide bombings, that was definitely, it changed a lot.
Even with the Gulf War, which apparently we are about the same age, and I remember it, and I remember not so much being scared as getting fear through osmosis from my parents and people, my friends' parents. But even then, we really didn't understand what's going on. No one was there to tell us, and there weren't many news channels to tell us. And up until recently, I thought, Saddam Hussein just attacked Israel, and it was a war between Israel and Iraq. And only recently did I put the puzzles together, and I realized, no, it was a war between Iraq, Kuwait, and the United States. And Saddam started shooting rockets at Israel as a leverage technique against the United States. So we were like just doing our own stuff, and all of a sudden there's rockets because someone else is like, you know what, we'll kill the Jews if you have a problem with it. And back then we didn't really think about any of that. We had our own small lives in Israel, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess we had to, just protect ourselves. So we had the rooms that we were supposed to, like, there's no safe rooms like there are today. So we put like those wet mops or whatever under the door, and you had to tape the whole thing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So how did that whole experience back then shaped your life and made you the person that you are today?
Wow. I don't know. I don't know how my life has been shaped, but I'll tell you this. One of the things that were really a theme in my family, my broader family, not just my nuclear family, is one, always be proud of who you are, which is very interesting because we have very, very different identities and personalities and demographics, religious-wise, and Sephardic and Ashkenazi, that in my family. But no matter, it was always like, who you are, you should be proud of it. The other thing is, always check if you're standing on the side of truth, and double check and triple check and quadruple check. But once you do, go with your truth all the way. So, if you really, really believe in something, but not a blind faith, but you really check all your assumptions and you believe in what you're doing, then you have to go all the way. And I think the third thing is never be ashamed of being Jewish or Israeli. That was it's almost like no one ever had to say it. It's just something that was so obvious in my life, my surrounding, my upbringing, that when all of a sudden I was getting these very, very broad signals of there's something wrong with you for being a Jew and an Israeli, I was like, whoa. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm proud of who I am. I stand by the truth. And then it was all out fighting back. But there might be other things. You should have my mom on the podcast rather than me.
Sure, bring her over.
I can tell you different things about how my upbringing shaped me. Yeah.
That would be great. So fast forward to more recent times. So you started working at Columbia Business School in 2019?
Yes, in July 2019.
Wow. So when did you start first noticing that something was off in the way they were treating Jewish students or faculty, or the way they looked at anti-Semitism in general?
So I have to be honest, and and a lot of people see this and say wow, look at you, you were part of the problem because you didn't know. And I say, you're right. I was part of the problem. I did not notice until it was maybe too late. But instead of trying to hide and say, and to hide the fact that I was part of the problem, I'm actually using that to say, I know what it's like being part of the problem. And now that I've seen the problem, I want to make sure that no one else is part of the problem. So I really did not know how difficult it is to be a proud Jewish or Israeli student, to be a Zionist. I had no idea because, first of all, I was at the business school. And there's a lot of issues about business students. Being Marxists or Islamist is not one of them, right? So we just didn't have that kind of like rage that typically happens in the humanities. And second, a lot of the things were happening still kind of like underground. If you wanted to know about them, you could, right? So it's not like I'm not absolving myself. Like there were books written about, Jews don't count, how to fight anti-Semitism by Barry Weiss. There were movies like Columbia Unbecoming, or in the early 2000s, Concordia had like a whole thing there. And there's a movie called Discordia. You could look them up, but I was not aware that was even something that required looking up. So I was not aware that there was a problem. I got a little bit of a glimpse of it in the fall of 2022 when Dave Chappelle went on this anti-Semitic rant on live TV and SNL. And for me, what was really shocking was how little any of the people around me in my department were saying. No one was saying anything. But the shock was not that they weren't saying anything about Jews. The shock was the contrast between how they were talking about anti-Black and anti-Asian racism post-2020 and everything was going on. And I was so proud of my colleagues for taking a stance based on those issues, but then all of a sudden, them not doing anything about when it comes to anti-Jewish hatred, I felt like something's off. But I also kind of like, okay, whatever. I was like, I called it out. I saw that, there's no real change, and I kind of left it. And maybe I shouldn't have. But then when October 7th happened, and for me, I really say October 12th, which was the first protest at Columbia, that was the opening shot. And I said, this time I have to fight it. Like, there's no other choice. I have to do something about it.
Yeah. So speaking of October 7th, did you even imagine anything of that magnitude happening? And did you imagine that your life would be changing the way it did? Because I'm sure your life has changed tremendously since then.
Yeah, look, first of all, if we're talking about imagining, then my tiny life in this grand scheme is so inconsequential, right? There's so many people that have both lost their lives or survived with mental and physical scars or kidnapped. Like, those were the real lives being changed, obviously, and the heroes and everyone that went fighting. But no one could have imagined something like that happening. We always, and I still do, by the way, felt like we're sitting on a powder keg and it will explode. We just don't know when. Right now, I still feel that with, there's a powder keg in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria area. And I feel like we're sitting on a powder keg again, but like, it's not like I can tell you, okay, so in 2 years, something horrible is going to happen. I just have that feeling. So yes, I knew that things were wrong, but no one could even imagine something of that scale. Go to the US and the diaspora, I had no idea. So I did not even know we were sitting on a powder keg here in the US, right? And to me, that was even a bit more shocking, because when you're bit by a rabid Rottweiler, then you'd say like, oh, that's horrible and that's shocking and I can't believe that happened. And of course, the rabid Rottweiler here is Hamas, not anyone, not anyone to say that Shai said something and something about this. But you can still understand that's the Rottweiler, that's what they do. But when you are bit by a poodle that actually was a Rottweiler in disguise, which is what happened to us in the diaspora, that was really shocking. Now, when it came to my personal role in all of this, is I just said to myself, this is my miluim, this is my reserves, and I just threw myself all in. Could have stopped for a bit to think about strategy, but I felt I didn't have the luxury. And maybe if I'd stopped, I wouldn't have fought the way I did. That was a very long way to say no one could have known that this would happen, despite some people saying that they knew. But the problem is not the fact that we didn't know what would happen. The problem is that so many people are behaving as if nothing has changed in the world. And the next time something will happen, they will be as unprepared.
Right. Just, I guess, with everything, things happen. People are surprised that it happens, and then a few years down the line, it happens again, and they're like, "Oh, we're surprised again." Like, it's not. People need to be prepared more, and
To me, that's the issue, and that's why I'm so passionate about traveling around the country and speaking to people and putting stuff online and writing and my book and all that, my podcast and all that, because I think people don't realize that the wave of protests, in the academic year of 2023, 2024, that wasn't a wave that kind of like disappeared. It was an opening shot in a war that we're not prepared for. So October 7th, 6:29 a.m., there was an opening shot in Israel for a war that Israel wasn't prepared, but quickly kind of like got caught to speed. And, I don't think we won this war. I don't think you win a war. Everyone loses, but at least we were able to achieve many things, including return of almost all living hostages, right? And now we're at the ceasefire stage. In the diaspora, it's the complete opposite. The opening shot was on October 8th, and the war never ended. Yet people behave as if it did. And to me, that's the scary part. And that's why I travel all around the country. And I tell people, there's a war happening. Even if you put your hand in the sand, it's still going to happen. And we need to get prepared for it.
Yeah, and it's something that I've been talking to like a lot of previous guests about, that they announced this is the end of the war in Israel. I guess Trump announced that this is it. There will be peace. There will be all these things. But then in Israel, I guess the government forgot that there's also this front that we have to fight, and we're going to be fighting it for quite a while, I think, unfortunately. The social media front and the campuses and anti-Semitism around the world, that's a war that's going to take us a few years, I feel like, to fight, and hopefully we'll win at the end, but I don't know.
So just to sharpen that a little bit, the social media is not a war. That's a battlefront. The campuses is not a war. It's a battlefront. The city councils, like New York City mayor-elect, those are all battlefronts. The war that we are fighting in the diaspora is a war of ideas. Mm-hmm. Do you stand with the idea that Jews deserve the same rights as any other people, both individual and communal? Mm-hmm. Do you stand with Western liberal values? And do you stand with democracy? That's the war. That's one side. Then the other side is the Islamist Marxist alliance, the Red-Green Alliance. And I want to be clear, Islamist, not Islamic, because Islamist is a political ideology. But the idea is that there are, some people that are better than others, right? And Jews are considered like lesser. And two, some that democracy is not the right way. And three, that Western liberal values are not the right way. That's the war. Now we're waging it in different battlefields. I believe that if we're able to survive, when I say we, not just Jews, but all of the people fighting, Jews and our allies fighting together, if we're able to survive long enough, we will win this war, because we have something that the other side doesn't have, the truth.
Yeah.
We don't shy away from complexities, from nuances, because we know that at the core, we are right. The problem is that in the war of ideas, the truth doesn't always become apparent in the short term. It only becomes apparent in the long term. We have to fight and survive for the long term so that the war will be won. Yeah.
So I think you were essentially the first person to go on, college campus and fight for the Jewish students, especially in Colombia. Were you surprised by the reaction of the students? What kind of stories did you hear from Jewish students of what they were going through at the time?
Oh, I was shocked. I was shocked. I was fuming. It was like, because I would go on campus. I'm in my 40s. I live off campus. I have a wife and beautiful children. I have my office. I used to have my office to run away to. I was in the thick of it when to fight, but then I could retreat. And to learn from these students that they are experiencing this in their dorms, in their classrooms, in their social clubs. There's a student that 2 a.m. would be woken up and night after night with people banging on our door saying dirty Zionist, until the university said, the only way for us to help you is to move you. Rather than deal with who the perpetrators are, we'll move you to a different dorm. I was angered. And just this week, Columbia's task force, anti-Semitism task force, came out with a 90-page report on the student experience in the classroom at Columbia. It took them 2 years to write a beautiful report of what we've been saying since day one, right? Imagine being a student, an Israeli student in a classroom, being told, like, what does it feel like to be a part of a murderous society?
Yeah, genocidal society.
It's shocking to me that's, and you know what really shocking to me? That it's happening in the places where you'd least expect it to happen. If this was at a beer hall like in Munich, and you'd be like some drunk people in Lederhosen, like you'd be like, okay, whatever. But these are like, quote unquote, enlightened, educated people treating others this way just because of their religious or ethnic identity. And it really, it still blows my mind. I try not to think about it too much, I have to tell you.
Yeah, it is very shocking that it happened in all of the big Ivy League schools, all the schools that are supposed to be the best of the best, and like, what do they learn over there? Like, that's what I've been thinking about it, because I know they have some faculty members that actually teach them anti-Israel stuff.
Oh, I wish there were just a few faculty members. We know of like at least 3 to 4 dozen at Columbia. We, dozens at Harvard and at Rutgers. Like it really is everywhere. And as I've been writing my book, I've been so shocked to see how ingrained it is in all of these systems of education. It's happening in the classrooms, and then it's happening in the academic events, then it's happening at the academic associations, then it's happening, like, it's just everywhere. And part of it is our fault, that people like me didn't realize early enough to push back when it was, when it was easier. And part of it is the non-Jews that think like, not my circus, not my monkeys, right? Not my problem.
Yeah.
And that is something that I no longer have anger in my heart for that, but I have a huge disappointment from the non-Jewish community, broadly described, that said the moment they saw that the minority being targeted as Jews, said, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. And that is something that I still like, despite like, and I know in my book, I go into the psychology of indifference and the history of indifference, but even knowing all of that, I still can't come to terms with that. It's so hard for me to do so.
Yeah. I mean, we've been saying for a while, like, we always fight other people's battles as well. Like, we help with everyone else's situation. But when it comes to us, people just don't step up. They just stay silent.
You see, so for me, I don't see it as fighting other people's battles. When I speak up against racism, I'm not fighting other people's battles.
Yeah.
I'm fighting my own battle. I don't want to live in a society that is racist. When I speak, I'm not a man. I am a man. Sorry, I'm not a woman. It'd be funny if people
get a quote from them.
made a meme of Shai. I'm not a woman, but sexism is my problem. Right? I'm not gay or trans or queer, but homophobia, transphobia is my problem. It's not someone else's fight. And my problem is that when it was against the Jews, people said, no, not my problem. Right? Yeah. It is a societal problem. And if you're part of society, it should be your problem.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if more people look at it that way, which they should, then maybe we wouldn't be here right now, talking about these issues. So what would you tell Jewish students that are about to start school next year and they're set to go to one of those Ivy League schools that basically betray their Jewish students in the past couple of years? What do you advise to them? How they should proceed and, stay over there and learn in this environment?
I tell students, so I have a lot of advice, and when I travel, and I speak, I speak for about an hour just on this topic. But I'll say, really it boils down to this: 20 years from now, when you look back, you're not going to remember what you studied in Calculus 1 or in organic chemistry or in introduction to film or whatever classes you're taking. What you are going to remember is that you stood up for yourself, that you stood up for a cause, that you stood up for your community, right?
Mhm.
So while, yes, students should go to schools to study and better themselves, get a job, to make the world a better place and all that stuff, if the price that you pay for that is keeping your head down, hiding your Jewish identity, not speaking up about Jewishness, Israeliness, Zionism, or whatever it is, if that's the price that you should pay, then that is way, way, way worse than the 80, 90,000 bill that your parents get every year.
Mhm.
Because you can make back the money, but you cannot make back the self-respect.
Right. Yeah.
So you gotta fight. Now I tell people like how to fight. So first of all, I tell them peacefully and non-violently. That's my number one rule. 2 is you don't have to fight on your own. You need to find your secular minyan, right? So 10 people that will fight with you, Jews and allies. And you need to create spaces where the fight is not just pushing back against the anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli and anti-American hatred, but also spaces where you push for something, that you create positivity in the world, that you create a situation there where the university hopefully one day looks and says, you know what, in the choice between Jewish students who build and kafir covered hateful students that destroy, I want to stand with the builders.
Yeah. So as a father of 2 young kids, how did you share everything that's been going on with your kids, and how do you protect them from all this craziness that's going around?
Not good, not well, and not good enough. I'll be honest with you. So I recently, so in my podcast, here I am with Shai Davidai, shameless plug. I just interviewed my son.
Yeah, then I was going to ask you about it later because I watched that episode.
And part of it was to see how he sees things from his perspective, because from his perspective, he had no idea that wars happen in Israel. He had no idea that terrorism exists. All of a sudden, October 7 hits, and he sees his mom and dad in complete shambles, and then he sees them like becoming full-time activists or almost full-time activists. He had no idea what's going on, and he had to like figure things out by listening in on our conversations, asking us a few things, and only a few weeks, maybe 6 weeks in, we I think it was my wife probably because she's the smarter one, but we had like the idea of like, let's talk with him, let's ask him, like let's see what's going on in his mind. We found out he's talking about the hostages in his school because he sees in the streets posters of hostage kids. This was before the November 21st ceasefire, and he goes and talks with his friends who are the same age and tells them about it. Like we didn't know. The most important thing for me is to tell him 2 things. One, that Hamas is bad, but Hamas doesn't equal Palestinians, and Palestinians doesn't equal Hamas. Because I wanted to make sure that whatever comes from him, we don't just perpetuate the cycle of hatred and violence.
Mm.
Right? The second thing I wanted to tell him is that nobody wins in a war, that this war is a necessary war, that we have to do this war, but the fact that you're already in war means that you've lost something because you don't want to do it. But the third thing is that no matter what will happen, Israel will come ahead. Because I truly believe it. I just don't know what that ahead looks like, and I don't know what cost will be until we get that. So we gave him that like moral framework, but also the feeling of safety that don't worry, we're going to be okay. And we tried not to hide almost anything. I mean, of course, he doesn't really he's too young to understand the concept of rape. I think any person is too young to understand such a horrific concept. But it was, so we didn't really talk to him about that. But we did talk to him about, the deaths and the killings, and he went with us to every march for the hostages and heard the hostage families speak, and then the rescued hostages and the released hostages. It was important for him to be part of this. Our daughter is a bit too young to understand anything, and that's been a blessing as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate. My daughter is 10, and I don't sugarcoat things for her. I tell her things as they are. I try in the beginning not to get to like the nitty-gritty details of everything that happened, but I did give her like the story of what happened. And I'm sure your son did the same. She related more to those kids closer to her age that were kidnapped, and that really saddened her. Like that part I think was the most difficult for her, because she was thinking like, what if I was there? What if they took me?
That to me was when my son asked me that to me was the worst, because I had to lie to him and say, don't worry, we would never let something like that happen to you, which is what I assume every parent have and would and will say to their kids, but also the parents of the kids in October 7.
Yeah.
And like, I would lie to him while tearing up, knowing that some things are out of my control. And that was a very, very difficult thing to go through. But there's also a positive silver lining, because assuming, and I know it's not a far-fetched assumption, but assuming that this is not Israel's last war, and this is not the diaspora's last war, our children, if they live in Israel or in the diaspora when they grow up, will have to deal with a variant of the same issues. And if we instill in them that their parents fought for them, it will be much easier for them to fight for their children.
Right.
Many people in the hostage marches in New York City, of the older people, remember marching with their parents for Soviet Jewry in the 1970s, right? And those that marched for Soviet Jewry in the 1970s remembered marching with their parents in the late 1930s for European Jewry, and those before them fought for Russian from the Pale of Settlement coming in the early 1900s. So this is how we instill the values in our children, not just by telling them you have to fight for what's right, but showing them that we fight for what's right.
Yeah, and we have different ways of doing that as well. So they can choose whatever works best for them, but they need to know what's going on. Yeah. That's for sure. So I was going to ask you later, but now that we brought him up, was any of his answers or questions surprising to you when he was on your podcast?
I mean, I was shocked by how articulate and thoughtful he was, despite knowing that he's an articulate and thoughtful boy or young man, or whatever. I was just shocked by how much he was thinking about these things. But when I asked him, like, a question like, do you know what anti-Semitism is? Mm-hmm. And hearing a 9-year-old distill it, it's hatred of Jews. Like, just no sugarcoating, no going into the history and all, like, just hatred of Jews. And the fact that he understands that is sad and horrible, but also strengthening, because it shows that at least he knows what's going on.
Did he ever ask you even before then, like, why do they hate us?
Oh, why? Yeah. He asked me quite a bit. I tell my kids the truth is, and I tell them, like, nobody knows.
Right.
That's the truth. But they hate us because we're different.
Yeah, I guess somewhere that's what it is.
But then I told him, but do you like being different? And he said, yeah, I love being different. I love doing Shabbat. I love doing this. I love doing that. I was like, so they can hate us however much they want, because they hate us for our strengths, not our weaknesses. And that is a good thing. If you're going to be hated, at least be hated for something you're good at.
Yeah. So on the podcast, so he had like a mask on. Obviously, you're trying to protect him from, I'm sure you've had some crazy threats and messages from all some crazy people. So in your opinion as a parent, how do we make sure that our Jewish kids don't have to hide themselves in the long run? How do we make sure that they grow up to be proud Jews and just, don't have to live in fear?
I thank you, because that's a question I've been thinking about a lot. And the answer is so simple. Some people are going to watch this or listen and say, I don't think that's right. But the answer is this. If you show your kid every day, not just on the holidays, not just on Shabbat, but every day, that you're visibly Jewish and proud to be so in the world, your kids will follow.
Yeah.
Now, some people will say, yeah, but what about safety? The safety comes from this point. If we all do this, like a Spartacus moment, I'm Spartacus, like all of us wearing Eitan Chitiat's I'm That Jew shirt, all of us wearing a Magen David, if you're religious, you put a yarmulke, whatever it is. But if we're all visibly Jewish in the world will have to deal with it, will be much stronger, and our kids will see it, and then for them, that will be second nature. Now, of course, there's going to be the people that start and are going to have more difficulties, right? The first people that came out as openly gay or lesbian in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, they paid a huge price.
Right.
But they paved the road that now you have preteens that openly say who they are and they don't need to have that fight. But in order to get to that point, you can't skip the people that really put themselves out there. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to tell everybody to do. Wear whatever it is. You want to go crazy with blue and white and whatever it is, but show your kid every day that you leave home as a visible Jew. And they will want to do that as well.
Yeah, and that's something I talked to Eitan about also in our previous episode. And somebody commented on the reel that I shared from his episode. She's like, oh, but he's talking because he's in Israel, he's not in the US. What are we going to do? It's dangerous. So I told her, I said, if the less we talk, the bolder they get. And then they're going to continue doing what they do. And then we're going to keep hiding. That's not a solution. We have to be out there, to put ourselves out there. And the more of us do it, the quieter they're going to get. So
I also tell people, like, what's the worst that will happen? Like, no one's going to come in the street, see a Magen David and pull out an RPG just because we don't have RPGs running around. Like, the worst that can happen is someone's going to be triggered. They're going to start screaming at you. Maybe they'll even spit at you. I've had stuff like that happen, but that's like 1 out of 100 interactions. 90 interactions, nothing happens. 9 interactions are with other Jews or non-Jews that are like, hey, good for you. And then there's that 1 interaction that's horrible. But even that 1 interaction that's horrible, what typically happens is you get the crazy anti-Semite screaming at the visibly Jewish person, and then 10 people around, most of them non-Jews, saying, in this scenario, I know who's right. And all of a sudden you have 10 new converts, not converts to the belief, but converts to the cause. So even the worst thing that can happen by you being visibly Jewish is ironically a good thing. That being said, if you're walking in the middle of the night in a Dearborn, Michigan, or in some like very unfriendly space for Jews, probably I would be more either in a bigger group or more guarded in my visibility. But that should be the exception, not the rule.
Right. And we should always be careful in general as people, I think, walking down the street in the middle of the night, especially in areas that are not as friendly and nice to anybody, not just Jews. But yeah, I mean, hiding ourselves forever is not the solution.
It's not a solution for solving the problem, and it's also not a self-respecting solution.
Yeah.
Right? How can you tell someone be proud of who you are, but only inside your home? That's like
Yeah,
saying you should be openly gay in the closet. That doesn't work.
right.
You need to be out there. You need to celebrate who you are and fight for who you are. It's not just fun and games.
Yeah. So speaking of this kind of incidents, did you ever have any incident with a hater that was really scary to you, that kind of made you maybe rethink of the things, how you do things, or did you just?
Yeah. I was once filming some content in Washington Square Park with Zach Sage Fox and Noah Kochva. And in fact, I was taking a break because it was too much for me. And all of a sudden, this very, very tall man aggressively started like screaming at us, broadly construed, right? Like it was multiple us. And I immediately assessed the situation. I could see that he was holding some bags. So I was like, okay, he's off to somewhere. He doesn't have a weapon. And I really approached him very close. At some point, we were like, our noses were almost touching.
Oh, wow.
But I was speaking like extremely quietly and say like, would you like to have a conversation? Would you like to talk about the things? Like really just calming him down. But at some point, it was clear that he was becoming too aggressive, and I immediately raised my voice, and he was like shocked, and then kind of like basically forced him to walk away. That was a very uncomfortable situation, but that's rare that happens. Another time I was in a subway and this woman asked me, "Hey, are you Shai Davidai?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she started screaming at me or being a baby killer, a genocider, like all that stuff. And then she immediately got off the train. She waited until the last moment. And to me, and that's something that you have to also remember.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these protesters, the ones that wrap their faces in keffiyehs, they are not dangerous one-on-one. They wrap their faces because they are ashamed of what they're doing. Because if you meet them in a coffee shop one-on-one, even if they hate you, they'll be nice to you. The ones you should be afraid of are the ones that are not wrapping their faces. The ones that are openly with their faces, with their names, like Nordine Kiswani from Within Our Lifetime, Hatem Bazian from American Muslims, like those people that in your face will tell you Israelis and Israel should not exist. Those are the dangerous ones.
Yeah. So you had on your podcast, Here I Am with Shai Davidai, you get to interview so many like amazing people. I think some of them were on my podcast as well, like in the past. How have these conversations impacted you, like on a personal level? And was there anything in particular that resonated with you and like you took with you afterwards?
Every single conversation. I can tell. I have to tell you, like whenever we record a season. So right now my son's episode was the first episode of season 6, and that's going to go for a while. But we recorded all the episodes, and whenever we record the episodes, it's like 4 intense days of like 8-hour filming, and I leave every day drained, but way more hopeful than I start every day, because I realize, one, how many good people there are in the world. 2, how many people are fighting. It's not just about being good, but are fighting back. Mm-hmm. And 3, how many different ways there are to fight back. And every conversation that creates that. So someone like Dalia Ziada, and an Egyptian journalist who's now lives as basically a refugee in the United States, because he had the audacity to say that Hamas, massacred people on October 7th, right? Someone like her, she shows me the strength and the power of one individual to stand up to an entire system and pay the ultimate price. Like what I've paid is nothing compared to her. But then you have someone like Dr. Jonathan Doneff from Daily Giving, who saw a problem. Like, I want to help people give to charity, but there's no automated way to do it, and created an entire system called Daily Giving, which is like $1 a day, and it's automatic, and you don't have to think about it, and you're doing good in the world, right? So very different problems, very different tactics, but each one of them is solving the problems, and both of them were not equipped to the situation, just like I wasn't equipped to the situation that I was in. The thing that connects them and all my other guests is that they are just regular people. That if you had no idea about their stuff, you'd think they're all Clark Kents, and you would never have an idea that they were actually supermen and superwomen, if not for the thing that they are doing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some amazing people out there, and I'm glad there are platforms like these podcasts that highlight these people, and like you also, and share their stories. And like, I think it's important to the people know about them, and help them with, what they do as well.
Yeah.
So do you see yourself ever going back to teaching at some capacity, or is that it for you?
I'd like to think of myself as teaching even when I'm not in the classroom. I've always wanted to be an educator. Educator is someone who educates. Now, of course, I've been lucky and privileged to be in the best rooms in the world to teach. Columbia Business School is no joke. But I have taught in maximum security prisons. I have taught in undergrad and grad and doctoral and executives, and when I put out many of my videos on social media, I ask myself, okay, what is something that I think people may not be getting right or may not be focusing on? Where do I want to steer the public conversation? When I go and speak with groups, or communities throughout North America and throughout the world, really, I see that as a teaching opportunity, but not just I teach them, but also I learn from them. I don't know if I'll ever be back in the capacity of a professor teaching a 16 or 12-week semester about a specific topic, but I want to bring my teaching and my education to everything that I do. Part of me writing a book is about that, is finding different ways to educate people, because people don't, if we only learn by sitting in a classroom for 4 years for the rest of our lives, then we're doing something wrong.
Right.
But I learn from podcasts, I learn from books, I learn from, documentaries, I learn from conversations, I learn from so many different ways, and that's what I want to bring to the world.
I feel like once an educator, always an educator. There's just something in that.
My family is split in half between business people and high school teachers and principals. And
oh wow, so you got some people to learn from.
And I was a professor at a business school, so I thought that I was merging both, but that was, I guess, no longer the case. So.
Maybe another time again. So before we leave, are there any new projects that you have coming up that you want people to know about? You have your book you mentioned, right? Anything else that you want people to know about?
Whoa, you should have told me about this question before, so I would have prepared. I'm not in liberty to talk a lot about it because I don't yet know what will happen out of this, but I have realized that for me, at least in New York City, but I think this is true for every city in the United States and Canada, we need a core group of activists, of people that if there's a problem in a public school or with the mayor or with something, we need to be able to bring out 200, 300, 400 people for a peaceful rally or demonstration or protest immediately or within 48 hours. Because we can't keep this game of cat and mouse where they attack us and then 3 months later, the big legacy organizations, which are great and incredible, and I have just a lot of positive things to say about them, but then they come and do some symbolic solidarity event. We need to be out there in the world, showing the world that Jews fight back, again, peacefully and nonviolent, but fight back. So I am with a few people starting to see if we can bring something like that into existence in New York City. Weekly meetings where we educate ourselves, where we engage in activism, not just in influencing and advocacy, but actual activism. If it works, the hope is to then figure out what works and export it to other cities so other Jews can organize themselves under this loosely network that we call Here I Am, but it could be whatever it is. Yeah.
All right. What is your message to the young Jews out there?
For young Jews specifically,
Yeah.
your parents' generation, myself included, fucked things up. And we're sorry. And we'll give you all the resources that you need so you can fight back. Financial, social capital, networking, advice, whatever it is. And then I go and tell the parents, it's on you to go and find the young people that want to fight back and give them this infrastructure, because it's not enough just to cry about how, look at all the horrible people out of Columbia and Harvard are going to be the leaders. Well, they're going to be the leaders if you don't push for young Jewish men and women to be the leaders.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's a great message.
Yeah. And remember, everyone, this was just the opening shot. We got to fight back, and we're not ready. And I'm here. I want to help people get ready.
Yep. Shai, thank you so much for being here. It's been a true pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Esti.
And thank you all for listening. Shabbat Shalom. Yes. We'll see when the episode will be released, but I'll try as close to Shabbat as possible.
Well, even if it comes on a weekday, people will know that you and I had this conversation right before Shabbat, which is nice.
Yes, it is. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.